The Legend of the Mermaid. Once upon a time in the village of Gogoro, there was a forbidden river that the villagers had abandoned. Stories of an evil mermaid had been passed down through many generations, warning the men of the village to beware of the river and never go near it. The village elders would tell people that anyone who ventured near the river would never return. Because of this, everyone feared and avoided the river, except for a man named Segun. Segun was a bold and fearless man who didn't care about what others said. He would secretly go to the forbidden river to fish, as he had started a fishing business. The market day was the next morning, and, as usual, Segun packed his fishing net and headed to the forbidden river. As he began to fish, his hook caught onto something very heavy. Excited, Segun started pulling, and the surface of the water began to glow a bright yellow, becoming more and more radiant. He had no idea what he was pulling, but he kept on. To his shock, Segun saw a glowing mermaid, unconscious, tangled in his fishing line. As he dragged her to the riverbank, the mermaid suddenly opened her eyes and quickly pulled Segun deep into the river with her. In mere seconds, Segun found himself in a cave with shallow water and an air pocket. The golden mermaid moved closer to Segun, saying, "After centuries, I finally caught a man," as she caressed his body. Segun pleaded with the mermaid to let him go, but she refused. "I will make you my husband," she said, and every night she would sleep with him. One day when the mermaid wasn't around, Segun tried to escape. He swam up to the surface and, weak and exhausted, ran back to the village. Everyone was shocked to see Segun after he had been missing for several months. He shared his story and explained what the golden mermaid had done to him. A few days later, when Segun thought everything was over, the now pregnant golden mermaid needed him by her side to give birth. She swam to the riverbank and began singing a haunting song that reached Segun wherever he was. The song lured him back to the river, and with him by her side, the mermaid gave birth to a daughter. The villagers noticed Segun acting strangely, as if drawn to the river again, and raised the alarm. When they reached the forbidden river, they saw the golden mermaid with Segun. Despite his cries for them to stop, the villagers rushed at the mermaid and stabbed her. The baby in Segun's arms cried loudly. The villagers demanded that the mermaid's child be killed as well, but Segun refused to abandon the child. The escape of Segun and the journey of Damory. After the villagers attacked the golden mermaid, Segun managed to escape with the baby. He fled the village with his daughter, whom he named Damory, meaning death from the sea. Damory grew up to be a strong and beautiful young woman, completely unaware of her mysterious past. Segun had only told her that her mother had died during childbirth. One fateful morning, as Damory was walking down a hill, she heard strange drumming and celebration sounds in the distance. It was something new, odd, and irresistible, so she decided to follow the noise. She followed it all the way to a large river where she saw some villagers swimming. As she got closer, the drumming and celebration sounds became clearer, but there was no sign of any people celebrating. Curious, Damory entered the water and began to swim. Suddenly the sounds became louder and clearer. They were coming from under the water. Shocked, Damory looked around and asked the nearby swimmers, "Do you hear the music coming from below?" But they only gave her sarcastic looks. A girl named Mabaro swam towards her and asked, "What sound are you talking about?" "I hear music coming from underwater. Don't tell me you can't hear it, it's so clear," Damory replied. But before she could finish her sentence, Mabaro was suddenly pulled underwater at incredible speed. Startled, Damory immediately dove in to follow her. As she swam deeper, she saw two large mermen dragging Mabaro, who was choking and gasping for air. Determined, Damory swam faster, trying to catch up. The mermen turned and looked at her with amusement and disbelief. After several minutes of swimming, Damory finally saw where the drumming was coming from. There was a powerful underwater kingdom of mermaids and mermen holding a grand festival with drumming and dancing all around. As the mermaids noticed the strange girl swimming towards them, following their warriors, they quickly swam over and captured her. They brought her to the festival grounds, where a massive merman with 2 tails swam towards her boldly. "Who are you, and how did you enter our kingdom?" he demanded. It was at that moment that Damory realized she was breathing underwater. "I don't know. I just followed the kidnappers," she answered, shocking the mermaids even more. "She can speak underwater." "Impossible," they whispered among themselves. The 2-tailed merman swam closer to Damory. "You are an abomination, and we do not tolerate abominations here." He turned to the mermaids and shouted, "The gods have blessed us with 2 sacrifices today. It won't be just one girl like usual." All the mermaids cheered with excitement. They tied up Damory and placed her next to the unconscious Mabaro. Then they dragged both girls to the center of the river kingdom, where a massive fish with razor-sharp teeth slept with its mouth wide open. "You 2 will taste good," they said, preparing the terrifying ritual. "For our gods," shouted the 2-tailed Triton. The 2-tailed Triton shouted, "For our gods," as they threw Damory and Mabaro into the fish's mouth. As the fish swallowed them, Damory's skin touched one of the fish's teeth, breaking it. As soon as they reached the fish's stomach, Damory's blood spilled into it. The fish let out an incredibly loud scream, immediately waking up Mabaro, and began moving away from the mermaids. This was unbelievable to the mermaids, as the fish had not moved from its spot for centuries. The massive fish thrashed violently through the water, as it was forbidden for it to taste the blood of a mermaid. Still making ear-splitting sounds, it rushed through the river and, after a few seconds, spat Damory and Mabaro out onto the shores of an uninhabited jungle in the distance. When they landed on the shore, their hearts were pounding, and they held each other tightly. After a few minutes, Damory looked at Mabaro. "Are you okay? You were unconscious the entire time we were in the mermaid kingdom." Mabaro, still catching her breath, looked at Damory in panic. "Mermaid kingdom? What do you mean mermaids? Did we just come out of a giant fish?" Damory nodded. "We need to leave this jungle and find a village before nightfall," she said, and they started walking into the jungle. They walked for hours, clinging to each other in fear, singing songs to calm themselves. Eventually they came across a path. As they walked further, they saw a sign that read, "Welcome to Gogoro Village." Damory and Mabaro quickly ran inside and spoke to some of the village elders, telling them their story. The elders listened with skepticism and then told them the tale of the mermaid they had killed many years ago. The elders allowed them to stay and gave them a room for the night. The next morning, Mabaro and Damory decided to continue their journey, but first they wanted to wash off the lingering smell of fish from their bodies. They asked for water, and the villagers directed them to the river where Damory had been born, though neither of them knew it. As soon as Damory's hand touched the water, she transformed into a golden mermaid. Mabaro, seeing this, screamed, and soon everyone in the river started shouting, "Mermaid! Mermaid!" The village men were alerted. Damory was still in shock, staring at her golden scales, while Mabaro looked at her in disbelief. When the village men arrived with their arrows, they began shooting at Damory. Mabaro ran to stop them, but an arrow struck her in the arm. Damory screamed loudly as Mabaro fell to the ground. Damory crawled toward her, trying to protect her as the chaos unfolded. The villagers of Gogoro carried both of them to the center of the village. They placed Mabaro, who was bleeding, beside Damory, surrounded them, and began chanting, "Every mermaid must die in Gogoro. Every mermaid must die." Damory pleaded with them for help, explaining that she didn't know how this had happened to her, reminding the elders of her previous story. One of the elders approached her with a machete. "Where is your mother, young girl?" he asked. Damory replied that her mother had died during childbirth and that her father had raised her alone in another village. "Is your father a fisherman by any chance?" asked the old man. Damory nodded